All right. Okay, well, welcome everyone. Tom Calvanese here. I manage the Port Orford Field Station that we're sitting in, and I'm also director of Oregon Kelp Alliance. Thanks everybody for showing up in person, and thanks everybody for showing up online. We're going to try to do both in-person conversations and answer and discuss and ask questions, but we also have some folks online. Dr. Sarah Hamilton, who's our scientific coordinator, is in the chat. So she may field questions that come up online, and we'll just sort of go back and forth. So what are we here to talk about? For those of you who don't know, the Oregon Kelp Alliance really started about 5 years ago in response to reports that we were getting, frankly, from a bunch of urchin divers here in Port Orford that showed up in this room and were telling me, there's something going on out at Orford Reef. We don't know exactly what's going on, but it's not good. There's a kelp loss happening out there. There seems to be a whole bunch of purple urchins that used to not be around. And, that was just the beginning. But it started a process of us coming together, joining with scientists and with recreational divers and other folks that were interested in kelp forests here in Oregon. And we started the Kelp Alliance, just started having informal meetings, but pretty soon it grew into this much larger organization. And I'm just going to say a few things about some of the stuff that we're up to right now. I'm doing the two computer things, so bear with me. So I'm going to touch on a few things that we're involved in right now, but what we're really going to focus on tonight is really want to hear from you all about the kelp forest stewardship plan that we're developing right now under a NOAA grant that we received last year. A couple other projects that we've been working on. Myself and Dr. Ford Evans are co-PIs on a research project funded by Oregon Sea Grant, just experimenting with the co-culture of purple sea urchins and dulse, looking at the potential commercial viability of that. Myself and about 60 authors around the world just published the Kelp Forest Challenge Roadmap. There's a bunch of groups like ours around the world working on this issue globally. And the challenge is, can we protect and or restore 4 million hectares of kelp forests around the world by 2040? That's a very ambitious goal, but there's a lot of groups around the world working on this right now, and we're one of those groups. And recently, we received some philanthropic funds to pilot the Oregon Restorative Kelp Mariculture Project. This is an in-water kelp cultivation project that we're just getting started. But tonight, we're really going to concentrate on this work that was, like I said, is just funded by NOAA. Two parts, two deliverables this year. One is a status report that's being led by Dr. Hamilton, looking back historical data and current data that were collected mostly last year to basically do a snapshot of the kelp forest here in Oregon to sort of report out the status of our kelp forest along the coast. And then tonight, Elise Coachman, who we brought aboard to focus on the development of this stewardship plan that we're going to publish this year. And this is really a look forward. Going forward, what are the best practices? What are the kinds of things we want to execute in our kelp forests to protect and restore them in the areas that we prioritize? And hopefully we'll hear some from you guys about some of the ways we might go about that, what our priorities ought to be, how to prioritize different sites. But we're going to start with a little bit of an overview. And both of these products will be published in June of this year. So really appreciate you guys showing up and really looking forward to hearing what you have to say about this work. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Elise and take it away, Elise.
Thanks, Tom. So for those of you who don't know, I'm Elise Coachman. I'm the Oregon Kelp Alliance Program Coordinator, and I'm mainly tasked with producing the stewardship plan. So I really appreciate everyone showing up today and being here both in person and online. Just to kind of preface what we're going to be doing today is I'm going to give you a little bit of background, and then we're going to talk about the stewardship plan. And then I really want to have kind of an open discussion, get some feedback from you guys, and really hear from the community. I know that Tom had mentioned that urchin divers are one of the primary groups that really called and alerted that this problem was going on. And so we want to hear from you guys, particularly both urchin divers, commercial divers, dive operators, and hear what you guys think about what our plan should be moving forward and our priorities in that. So we're going to get into a little bit of background. I know a lot of people online and people here in person probably know a lot of this information, so we'll try and move through this quickly. So what is kelp? Kelp is a large brown marine seaweed. They line a lot of our coastlines, about a quarter globally, and so they're really, really important. There are a couple different species of kelp, and this map shows kind of that global distribution. So they really are a global, globally important ecosystem. And so there are tons of different benefits of kelp. I'm sure for different people that means different things. A few of them are listed up here. So we have coastal protection, habitat. It can be for farmed food. We can use it as juvenile fish habitat. It's really important habitat for abalone as well. It's important for recreation, fisheries, as well as tourism. And so I just want to take a quick pause and ask you guys in particular, what is kelp to you? Is it important? Why is it important? What does it mean for the work you do? And I know that's pretty obvious for the group here in person, but if anyone just has a quick shout out on like what kelp forests are to you, why are they important?
Food source for our product.
Food source for your product, for red urchins, yeah?
Yes.
Easy. If anyone has any online, you can drop in the chat, but food source for red urchins. I mean, you need kelp for red urchins. That's pretty simple.
Well, we'll pretty much eat anything, but that's primary farming.
Right, absolutely. So with that, we know that there are a lot of increasing threats in recent years for kelp forests, both here in Oregon, but also globally. And so this map up here shows different spots around the world where there have been declines for kelp forests worldwide. And Tom had mentioned this Global Kelp Forest Alliance. They're hoping to really address this problem in different areas around the world. We had here in Oregon different issues that have faced us. And so we've had El Nino 2014 to 2016, so warming waters, as well as obviously invasive species. So purple sea urchins and urchin overgrazing, invasive species, urchin overgrazing. So we've had an uptick in purple sea urchins, as well as pollution and other issues such as sea star wasting disease outbreak in 2013, 2014 as well, that have allowed these purple sea urchin populations to boom. Lots of different issues. And so just a quick background on purple sea urchins in particular. I'm sure you guys are well aware of what they are, but they are native to Oregon. They are not invasive, but they are a pest species. And so it's a really interesting dynamic where if you have invasive species, it's a lot different than if you have a native species. They're part of this ecosystem. And when we have an ecosystem that's in balance, purple sea urchins are a part of that. But we have in recent years had an overabundance of purple sea urchins here in Oregon. And we have this phenomenon of zombie urchins, which is where we have urchins who no longer have a food source, or they've eaten their entire food source and they end up converting over to a more dormant state. And there is a study done that shows that these urchins can survive in this dormant state for upwards of 16 months in a lab setting, but maybe even longer out in the ocean. And so that means that in an absence of food, when kelp forests are gone, they can just sit there. They lie dormant and then they wait for the kelp to regrow. And when kelp starts to reestablish, they wipe it back out. And so that's a really big issue for any sort of conservation work. Here, I just wanted to draw your attention to, on the left side, that's what healthy uni looks like. I'm sure you guys all know what healthy uni looks like. And then on the right side are purple sea urchins that were actually taken out of Nellie's Cove here in Port Orford. And so that's what unhealthy urchins look like. That's urchins who have basically digested their gonads. They have no reproductive gonads that are healthy left. They're not doing well. And I wouldn't want to eat the ones on the right. I don't know about you guys. I probably wouldn't want to eat the one on the left, but we'll see if it got beefed up a little bit more. So what is going on in Oregon? We're going to look just briefly at what the status report is going to be talking about. Dr. Sarah Hamilton is online, so if you have any further questions on these initial findings, she can answer them for you. We'll also have a lot more of this information in the status report that's coming out in June. And so just to look at what's actually going on here, our SCUBA data, so our underwater surveys, have shown that kelp forests have declined across the Oregon coast by 40 to 100%. And it varies regionally, so obviously certain areas are doing better than others. For example, we can see here that on the left side is data from Cape Arago. So these SCUBA surveys from Cape Arago, each dot represents a different transect. And very just briefly high level on these maps, if you see yellow, that indicates higher kelp density. If you see purple, that indicates basically zero kelp. And so left side Cape Arago, right side is Port Orford. We have Nellies up here, we have Redfish area, Humbug, Island Rock area as well. And so what these two maps basically show is that we have regional differences. Cape Arago has some areas that are actually higher kelp density, but also still have lower kelp density, whereas Port Orford, pretty much across the board, you see this near 100% decline in kelp. Any questions on that? Cool. And that doesn't mean that Cape Arago is in a healthy state. It just means that our approach for restoration and protection are going to be different in these different areas. Another key finding that we've had in our status report that you'll see is that there's been an estimated 75-fold increase in the density of purple sea urchins coastwide. That's significant. Whenever you have an increase in grazers, even if it's 5, even if it's 10 times, that's going to have a huge impact on the food source, on what they're grazing on. And so if you have a 75 times increase, you're going to have a huge impact on kelp forests. In particular, I like to think of this as, we say purple sea urchins are grazers. What else is a grazer? Cows. And so if you think of it as every place where you would have 1 cow, you actually now have 75. That's going to decimate the area that it's in and what it's feeding on. So a paddock that once would have had just 1 cow grazing happily and freely, you now have 75. It's going to wipe out what it's feeding on, that grass or those kelp forests, a lot more quickly. And so we have areas that used to look like this, and they now look like this. They have urchin barrens. This is a photo that Tom took, I believe at Humbug, is that correct, a few years ago? And so this is the state of just our waters right off the coast here. Also this. And so some of these are more transition areas where you have places that had kelp but are now being eaten by these purple sea urchins. I'm sure you guys have seen this all across the coast. The last piece of this puzzle that we're going to talk about today are Pycnopodia, so sunflower sea stars. They're a known sea urchin predator. So the upper right side, you can see a Pycnopodia actually feeding on a sunflower sea star. This is after sea star wasting disease, which broke out in 2013, 2014. We witnessed a really big decline in Pycnopodia all across the range from the Aleutian Islands up in Alaska down to Baja, Mexico. And so we had, I'll get back to that actually, if it lets me pass it. It's not, okay. Well, so Pycnopodia feed on purple sea urchins. And this video right here is what we call an urchin stampede. And so you can see these empty areas where the Pycnopodia has actually traveled between that have then pushed the purple sea urchins, and that you can see them essentially running away from this Pycnopodia. And so this video is to highlight this clear difference in having a Pycnopodia in these systems versus when you don't. It changes the behavior of purple sea urchins drastically. They do actually run away from sunflower sea stars. It's really fascinating. And so you can see the path that pycno took, where it's actually cleared of urchins because they've actually ran and gone to hide underneath or around or just moved out of the way. And so when you have not just one of these, but you have multiple of these sunflower sea stars in an area, it really does have a drastic difference on the urchin and the grazer populations there. I don't know if online, if you could hear me speaking over that, but that was an urchin stampede. So yeah, it's a really cool video. Oh, I don't know how to pass that. Sorry. We're not going to watch that again. And so just so you guys know, this sea star wasting disease broke out 2013, 2014, and it wiped out 90% of sea stars across their entire range, but 98% in Oregon specifically. And so losing 98% of sunflower sea stars had a huge difference on this ecosystem and is one of the driving causes of this purple sea urchin boom that we're seeing. And so the left side here is healthy sunflower sea star, the right side is a wasting sea star. And particularly in Oregon, this graph here shows our density of sunflower sea stars over time, based on observational encounters with sunflower sea stars. And you see that big drop off really happening around 2013, 2014, and then it's kind of flatlined since then. The one really positive thing I like to point people to is if you do look at 2023, so our most recent year, we have had some uptick in sightings of Pycnopodia. And it's not, hey, they're recovered, hey, they're doing great, everything's solved, but it is a little bit of a sign of hope that this species is starting to naturally recover here in Oregon. And those sightings are primarily juveniles in estuaries, so they're not the same size or in the same locations as they were historically, but it is a sense of hope for natural recovery and potential implications for captive breeding down the line. So key takeaways is that there is an active problem. I'm sure I don't have to tell you guys that. You see it every day, and it is ongoing. It's really urgent, and there's a strong role that purple sea urchins have played in the downfall of our kelp forest. So we've seen a loss in kelps, an increase in urchins, and a loss of Pycnopodia that have really been the three key parts of this narrative. So what can we do about it? That's where the kelp forest stewardship plan comes in. And so Sarah is working on the status report, which will have a lot of that information that I just shared highlighted when it comes out in June of 2024. A lot more really interesting data from our scuba divers, as well as historical data, and a lot of contributors for that. If you have any questions, feel free to ask her. She's on the chat online. And then now looking forward is the stewardship plan. So what are we going to do about these changes that we've seen? What is our approach? And I'm going to highlight kind of a holistic overview of what that looks like for us. This isn't necessarily work that we're actively doing right now, but it's work that we've either piloted or hoping to do in the coming years. And that needs to be done in order to save these systems. So this is, like Tom said, funded by a grant from NOAA's National Center for Coastal and Ocean Sciences. It's the partner document to the status report, and it's going to outline this framework for how we can protect and restore this system over the next 3 to 5 years and beyond. It's an interim plan, so it's kind of our first step in this process. It's not our final say in everything that we need to do, but it's really to get that momentum started. And so we have a place where we can begin to do this work moving forward, but it's a living document we can come back to and update in the years to come as we learn more about these systems. And it is incorporating diverse expertise and perspectives, so science, policy, community members, divers. We're consulting with a lot of different people to really bring in a bunch of different knowledge and expertise and making sure we're putting forward the best document we can. So what do we mean by stewardship? Stewardship, this is a definition I put together just off of what I understand and what I believe we're really doing with this plan is the thoughtful and careful application of a broad suite of natural resource management tools for the purpose of long-term ecosystem health. And so I know that's a lot of words and it's kind of buzzwordy. And so I would like to know what you guys think stewardship means. What does it mean for you and your practices and what you've done? What have you heard of the word stewardship? How has it been applied in areas of your life? Does this make sense, or do you have amendments to kind of the language that's up here? Does anyone have any input on that one?
Seems pretty solid to me.
Seems solid? Thoughtful and careful application of tools? Okay. Does anyone online have any input on that definition, or is that kind of in line with what they've seen previously?
Looks good.
Cool.
Well, I had one input actually.
Yeah, go for it.
Hey, everyone. I think part of it is also long-term human health in a sense, just because I think when human populations get a little desperate, I think the first thing that happens is the ecosystem gets attacked or stricken with resources. So I guess that title and stewardship kind of ensures that we're managing it in a way where resources used don't, put humans in too dire a spot too. So considering that side of things, especially in, communities that have been using these resources for millennia too.
Great. Is that, I think that was Kellen. Yeah. Thank you, Kellen.
Yep.
So
Hey.
the human component of it and just that aspect. And yeah, go ahead, Brad.
On the human component, us putting the resource, taking care of it, trying to harvest it for food and jobs and all that, and the scientific methods that we have used to manage the resources needs to be looked at, changed, because things are changing so quickly. I think the local indigenous knowledge of stewardship needs to be involved in our planning progress as well.
Great. Thank you for that. Yeah, I think adaptive management is kind of what we've been calling it, as well as co-management, things like that, to really integrate this idea of learning and then applying what you've learned and continuing that cycle, and then also being in touch with the people who have managed these resources for years and years and years before us. So thank you for that, Brad. Cool. I think there are a couple online others saying thank you to Kellen. Great. I'm gonna keep going, but I just want to highlight at the bottom, I also have protect what we still have and restore what we've lost. So our two key objectives here is protect and restore. So protection of these sort of at-risk reefs that we've seen, and then restore the ones where we've seen this huge decline. And so it's kind of a twofold approach here to stewardship. And with that, we have this suite of tools. And so, Brad, I think this goes partly to your point in some of these. There are a lot of different parts of stewardship and the suite of tools that can really uplift our ability to do this work, both effectively and efficiently, as well as to reach the greatest number of people possible and be successful in what we want to do. And so I've listed a lot of them up here. I'm not going to go into details here because we don't really have that much time, but I'm happy to talk more on any of these. Today, in particular, I'm going to focus on our core strategies. And so if you've come to an ORKA talk before, you've probably heard a little bit about our core strategies. They're grazer control, kelp enhancement, and predator recovery. And these strategies, basically, we're trying to address those three issues that we talked about in the background of grazer increase, kelp loss, and predator loss. And so we really want to flip the script on those, make sure we're addressing each of those issues to best give us the best results and be able to actually create a system that can be self-sustaining long-term and recover naturally as well. And so grazer control, that's the one that you guys are mostly here for, I think. So grazer control is basically getting our unchecked purple sea urchin populations back under control. There are a couple different methods for doing that. We have urchin culling, urchin removals, and urchin trapping. In particular, urchin culling is work that we've done with volunteer urchin divers. And so we have our recreational divers. There's probably a few of you online for this one who have gone out in the field, and we actually take hammers and smash urchins in place. All of these activities are under permit, so I'm not encouraging people to just go out and smash urchins willy-nilly, but part of this is going out and actually creating going out and smashing these urchins so we can remove those populations where they are. And then the second is urchin removals, which are commercial urchin divers who can go out and actually harvest those from the system, remove them from the water, and then we can use those primarily in like compost or other opportunities moving forward. But that's where we're actually removing the urchins from the water, or can be used for grow outs and then blue economy and reselling later on if we can get to that point. And then urchin trapping is another method of removing or taking those urchins out of the system, where on the top, on the far right there, you can see Tate made these traps that basically are like a giant ring with wire mesh. To put them down, leave them out there for a few hours or a day, pull them back up, they're baited with kelp, and you pull up urchins and you can harvest them that way and remove them from the system that way. So those are our grazer control methods. Does anyone have any questions on those ones? Cool. So our second core strategy is kelp enhancement. So different ways that we can actually boost up the population of kelp that's out there. And so reestablishing our populations through things like green gravel, spore bags, and seeded lines. I know Brad wanted to learn a little bit more about that today. We can talk more at the end if you have questions about that. Carol in particular has started to do some of that work for us. And so she's looked a lot at those methods. Everything I'm saying from the grazer control methods as well as the kelp enhancement methods all have different kind of cost benefits. So some of them are better in certain situations, are more cost effective, but also may have trade-offs on efficiency or people power and things like that. So certain situations require different methods to be applied. So it's not across the board, but all of these working in conjunction. And then lastly, we have predator recovery. And so supporting our sunflower sea star recovery, both naturally as well as through captive breeding. We have a three-pronged approach to that. So we need to, number one, track and monitor what we actually have out there in our wild populations and better understand how natural recovery is going. Number two is expanding our research on those urchin pycnopodia dynamics in the waters here in Oregon. We have some of our scientific advisors who've done a lot of that work up in Alaska, but we really want to bring that work down here into Oregon to better understand those dynamics in our backyard. And then lastly, assisting natural recovery and the development of a captive breeding program down the line. And so one of the ways that we've really done this with community engagement is this idea of making people aware of the opportunities to submit your observations. So if you do see a pycnopodia, specifically if you're out there diving, if you see a pycnopodia, take a picture of it. You can submit it through our website, through Sea Star Wasting. I don't think it's up there, it's under the bar, but it's seastarwasting.org, but you can go to our website and submit that. It would be really, really important if you do see one, so that we can have a better understanding of how our natural populations are recovering. Yeah.
We don't actually have a chance to take a photo, but these guys usually try and log it in their log.
Perfect.
When they're spotted.
Yeah, so if you know a general sense of like where it was, time you saw it, that's perfect. Any
That's
information.
right in their log book. So
Yeah.
It's got GPS location,
Yeah.
of the area we were diving in and how long they were down.
Yeah, that's really useful information. So if you forget where to send it, you can either ask me or Tom or go to our website. Yeah, perfect. Yeah. And we want to make sure that we have these observations because that really makes a difference in how we know how this population's recovering. And then that far right picture is actually from Aaron Ashdown, one of our fishermen who he's captain of FB Misty. He pulled up a pycnopodia on a long line over the summer, snapped a picture, told us about it. And so we do know that they are in these waters right off of our coast here. Carol found one. Faith, I know you're online, saw one as well this past summer. So
I have a question.
yes.
Have any of you guys seen any pycnopodia?
Yes.
How many?
One.
Just one?
Right down the beach.
Were you like out in the water or walking down the beach?
Waist deep, it was high tide. It was
Yeah.
minus tide, and I was walking my wife's family around,
Yeah.
showing different things around, and happened to find one sitting on the side of a rock. It just,
How big?
quarter size. It was juvenile.
Like just a baby. Wow, cool. Anyone else? No? Did anyone online happen to see one recently or no? I haven't, no one said anything, so I don't think so. Cool.
What's the highest north we could expect to see one, do you think, in Oregon? Would it go all the way up the coast?
All the way up the coast, yeah. So Pycnopodia's range goes from Aleutian Islands in Alaska all the way down to Baja in Mexico. So we have right now in terms of recovery, there have been a lot of sightings sort of in like jetty estuary areas, and there have been sightings in northern Oregon. So pretty much the whole coast. Yeah, if you're out there on the beaches, keep an eye out. Yeah, online, someone said two at Nellie's West last summer. They've been seen in Pacific City, Cape. Can't read that one. There is, yeah. Cool. So yeah, if you do see them, take a picture. If you can't take a picture, just log it and make sure that you are either telling Scott Growth or submitting it online just so that there's some record of it, because this data is really important for what we want to do moving forward. So I'm just going to throw this up. I'm not going to really go through each of these, but with this strategy approach and as well as our suite of tools, there are challenges and enabling conditions as well. So there are different things that are going to prevent us from doing this work really effectively, but on the flip side of that, there are things that can really uplift this work and allow this work to be more successful. If you have questions about any of these individually, I'm happy to talk about them more as well. So I guess we're going to get to the part now where it's what does this mean for divers, dive operators, and coastal communities? Where do you guys fit in? And so obviously everyone has a different reason for the importance of kelp forests in their life, what it means to them, their livelihoods, the work that they do. And so uplifting the recovery of kelp forests will really impact a lot of different people in different ways. And a few specific ways in terms of how people can be involved in the work that we want to do moving forward. Number one is the scientific communications aspect. So following our social media, we're ramping up our communication efforts in the coming weeks and months, so that we'll be able to share a lot more information, and you can also reshare that, get people involved, tell people that this is happening. The community engagement aspect. So being here today is a huge deal. So being able to actually engage in the work that we're doing and be a part of this conversation moving forward, as well as other events that we host. And also the Picnopodia sighting is one of those ways. And if you guys do want to hear about events moving forward, I know we had this question a lot on Monday and how to be contacted about that. If you go to our website, scroll to the bottom, you can sign up for our listserv, and we'll send you emails about upcoming events and hopefully a quarterly newsletter and other updates on the work we're doing. That's OregonKelp.com. Just scroll to the bottom and you can sign up. And then lastly, of course, strategies. So today is our divers and dive operators meeting. And so a lot of the people online are volunteer divers as well. And so they have actually gone out and done some of this work, but moving forward, we're hoping to host more of these volunteer diver events where we can go out and do our urchin pulling work, and then obviously supporting our commercial divers moving forward to help us with some of our urchin removal work and really target that to make that that system ramp up. So ways to engage right now, and this is the primary purpose of this meeting today, is really to hear feedback from you guys, hear your perspectives, understand your input, understand how you think we should be doing this work moving forward, what's most important, and where to prioritize this work. So one thing to get us started that I want everyone to do is, if you could go on your phone and either go to menti.com and enter that code or scan with the QR code. I'm just going to ask you to put in, it's going to prompt you with a question and sort of, what are you thinking right now? What are the main topics on your mind? What is sort of come up through this that's a theme? What hasn't come up that you'd like to talk about? And it'll ask you to put either 1 or 2 words, and then you click submit. You can submit as many responses as you'd like, and it's going to create a word cloud. And so if people submit the same word multiple times, it'll make it bigger. If not as many people submit, it'll be smaller. And so this is kind of just to get people involved and start getting you thinking about the work we're doing and start some conversations. And then we'll have some more targeted questions in a minute. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So the QR code on here, it'll work. Uh-oh. I think so. There we go. Yeah. Yeah, so as you submit words, it'll make words that people have also submitted, they'll get bigger. And if you, if it's only submitted once or twice, it'll stay smaller. And so the more people submit stuff, the more that it'll pop up. And then we can talk about some of the ones that have kind of come up a lot. And also, if anyone has any questions, feel free to either put them in the chat or we can talk about them while people are submitting their answers. And if you're here in person, feel free to grab snacks from the back and drinks and go to the bathroom if you need to. Without putting anyone on the spot, if you submitted bioremediation and would like to talk a little bit more about that, because I know we haven't really touched on that specifically. I'd love to hear more. I don't know who would have submitted that. If you don't want to say it, you don't have to chime up, but
That was me, and
Yeah.
that's just a combination of
Yeah.
removing the urchins so that when we plant the kelp,
Mhm.
it comes together.
right.
In my view, that's bioremediation.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's great. And I know we didn't really get too much into it, but a lot of what these strategies really need moving forward is not just one at a time, but we really need them kind of working in tandem to be able to, yeah. And part of that too is like, we can't just start outplanting kelp when there's still urchins there, because the second you do that, they'll just get plowed through by these urchins and that's useless. And so really having these working in unison to make sure that we can have the best results. That's great. Yeah. Culinary angle, I like that.
Minimal to none.
Minimal to none. What do you mean by that?
Well, those urchins where they're in the barrel.
Oh, yeah,
They're useless
Right.
at that point.
right.
Unless you take them out and feed them.
You're gonna need a lot of tanks for that, and if you can't get a viable seawater system, your crap dies.
I've got 200, I've got a few of them going, but you're not.
I had 12 down on the dock for a while.
I saw that was beautiful.
Yeah, just been keeping up seawater flowing.
I think that piece is really important, that culinary angle too, because I think it's a great way to really reach out to communities. We had done an evening with urchins. Brad was there as well for that back in the fall, where we had a lot of people come together. It was really a community outreach event in Bandon, and there were chefs there who were preparing uni that was branched, and there was like dulse that people were growing and things like that. And so it's a long way off from being a really strong economic incentive as a solution, but it is really interesting the potential that like avenue has for purples, because money talks.
Yeah, the only way to move forward on that is to start selling these purples, get them out of the market, let people see how much superior they are in sweetness to the reds.
They do taste amazing.
Oh,
Yeah,
the market's been building great. Everybody has preferred them. They're all beating me up on the price, but I can get the big red ones for cheaper. It's tough, but I think it's crucial to get the market going. That
Yeah.
people talking about it, and it got a lot of excitement. Everybody so far that has tried it has just loved it.
You get a lot of interest in purples down in California.
Oh, yeah. Did? No, not good. Center of the cultured animal, he's doing pretty good with it. Yeah, I tried to sell to trade winds, and they wanted a couple $1,000 minimum to get down there. Yeah, the logistics were just killing me. I'd like to try it again. They're doing live, but I don't know if they're processing. Processed purple maroonite from Urchinomics, and they were selling top price.
I guess, are there any other words that people have submitted or things that are up there that people want to talk about? I'd be interested in hearing about the Pacific Northwest Foraging Groups one, whoever had submitted that.
That was me.
Yeah.
I'm married to a mushroom person, and while I love the spirit of foraging mushrooms, I spend more of my time in the water while she does the mushroom foraging. And and again, I'm also nervous. I don't want to step on any toes from the economic and commercial angle, but in areas in which say the commercial part isn't as prominent, there is a kind of a relationship to the foraging community. I think that could be established. It would require training more freedivers, which I'm more than happy to help with. And I know there's freedive community people that would like to do that. But I think that's an angle that could be explored as well. It kind of plugs into, I think someone mentioned citizen science as well.
I think that's a great point, Kellen. I also think there's potential in the future for need for going into the intertidal areas. So that's where like the foraging groups, the groups that really walk along the coastline and do their beach walks could potentially have an impact in the future. But there's a lot of work that still needs to be done and data collected on those intertidal populations before we can do that. There was some conversation on Monday as well for this idea of the need for foraging for when we're actually doing some kelp outplanting work. So collecting the sori from these sort of washed up beached kelp rocks that we see along the coast. And so a lot of these people who do foraging or community citizen science work they're the ones that they're walking along the beaches, they're foraging for shellfish. They can be really instrumental in collecting that kelp for either baiting traps or using for spore bags and things like that. So there's definitely a lot of potential in those foraging groups. So thank you for putting that in, Kellen. Cool. Anyone else on this word cloud for now? Cool. All right, so I might hop off of this one for now, and we're gonna transition back over to our slideshow here. And so the next phase of this is I have a survey that I've put together, and this is also one that I can send out afterwards as well. The link is down at the bottom, so tinyurl.com/orkasurvey2, or that QR code. There's also a couple of QR codes scattered around for people who are here. I really want to hear what you guys have to say about things like what kelp forests mean to you, what changes you've seen, and then there's a question about prioritization in there and how we're picking the sites we're working at and doing active work at, as well as what would a restored kelp forest mean to you. Those are kind of the primary areas that I'd like to hear feedback from you guys. And so I'm going to give you, I'd say, let's go with till 4:55, so like 8 minutes to look through those questions. If you want to submit something online, take a quick break, bathroom break, and then we'll come back together and I want to go through those questions and hear what people are putting as their answers, and we can talk about each of those. And so, yeah, I'll give you a second to really look through those. Feel free to go ahead and submit, or you can submit a follow-up response to the survey after we've discussed them. Cool. And if anyone has questions in the meantime, I'm happy to stick around and chat while people take time to do that. And as you guys get down to that last question, that sort of other, if there are recommendations for things that you think should be a part of this plan that weren't really touched on or mentioned today, please feel free to put that input in there. And if you want us to follow up with you specifically, feel free to leave your email in that spot as well. So I just saw in the chat from Reed any upcoming culling dates and locations. I know that was going to come up during this conversation today. So we don't have anything in the books right now, but we're hoping to really ramp up that work this summer. We have done a lot of work on the prep side of things to make sure that we have in place what we need to be able to do those safely and effectively. Part of this plan in particular is making sure that we have a really good grasp on the work we want to be doing before we start doing it. And so hopefully this coming year, we'll have a couple of dates on the books. If you're part of the listserv, or if you obviously got the email for today, we'll follow up when we have those dates and locations. And yeah, happy to talk more about those plans when we have things solidified moving forward. I don't know if Sarah has any input on that one as well, or Tom. Culling dates or locations moving forward. Sorry, I caught you while you're eating.
Yeah, no, that was a good answer. The short answer is, excuse me, yes, there are plans, and no, we don't have dates yet. But stay tuned. But yeah, stay tuned. We'll send information out to the listserv that we have and the emails that we have if you want to stay up to date on that. And we'll post hopefully sign up sheets as well on our social media. So just stay tuned. I think the key is if you're not already signed up to the mailing list, sign up. Yeah, sign up for the mailing list. That's where that information is going to come out first. Yeah. Cool, so I'll give you guys like one more minute to wrap up what you're submitting online. You don't have to submit right now. You can also wait till the end of our meeting today, or you can submit an extra answer if something comes up during our discussion that you didn't touch on. Cool, so the first question in that survey is sort of, what do kelp forests mean to you? And I know we talked about this really briefly at the beginning, and I was just full of feed source. I mean, it's a really important sort of, it's feed for urchins. You need it for urchins to grow. Are there any other things that kelp forests mean to you that you've either submitted or are really important to be sharing when we're talking about kelp forests?
Juvenile fish protection,
Yep.
places for them to hide.
Yep.
There's a couple species of crab that pretty much hang out on kelp at all times.
Mm-hmm.
So
Lose kelp, lose them. Yeah. Yeah, really important juvenile fish habitat. Absolutely. tourism opportunities was one we got online. I think that's a great point. We have South Coast Tours here in Port Orford. That's been really instrumental to a lot of the work we've done, and really getting people out there and learning about the kelp forest. You need kelp forest to be able to show people kelp forest. So
We were doing two surveys one year and the kelp was so thick out on Orchard Reef that the diver going to do the survey had to army crawl across the top of the kelp bed, find a hole and go down.
crazy that it was that thick that it can hold up your weight at the top too. Yeah,
Well, yeah, 200 pounds, well, I think like about 180 pounds
Yeah.
plus a 40-pound belt.
wow. Crazy,
And now in that area, there's nothing.
nothing. Yeah. Cool, so I guess with that, which you just started to answer, is what changes have you seen over the last 10 years? And I know a lot of this work in particular, I think we talked about this before you showed up, Tom, but a lot of this work really came out of calls to action from our commercial urchin divers, basically seeing this firsthand, seeing these changes, sounding those alarm bells. And so the call for all of this to actually to do something about it came from this group, you know, and we really want to hear from you guys on what changes you've seen in the last 10 years. I mean, pretty obvious what that is, but also the firsthand stories that you have of an area where you used to be army crawling across the kelp canopy where there's now nothing. I mean, that's a really strong message. So if you have any stories like that, now would be a great time to share them or to submit it online as well. So if anyone has any more of those, I'd love to hear.
I can say for up here in Pacific City at Haystack Rock, growing up dory fishing in this area, I just remember my dad always being like, can't fish in front of the rock on, I guess it'd be the east side of the side facing the shore because there was so much kelp that your line would get caught, and like I would always get it caught. It was just like a huge forest, and now that's almost all gone, and that's not a concern as far as getting my little girl's line caught. But that has been a huge thing, and it's something that you can't see from the beach. And I think that is really important. A lot about things going on in the ocean is the people that are really seeing it, like as far as citizens and visitors, are the ones that are either going out there for dory fishing or maybe scuba diving on the South Coast, but it's not something that's easily seen, you know, just by the shore. So that's just one example.
Yeah. The recreational fishermen who are out in the water. That's a great one.
Well, the ring of kelp around Elliott's Cove is completely disappeared too.
Yeah.
When I first moved here, it was pretty much a solid band of kelp, probably about 60 feet off the rocks all the way around the whole cove.
Yeah.
So, and it's pretty
Nothing.
much gone now.
Yeah. I think it was Sarah who's online, Dr. Hamilton, who talked about there was a house listing that went up in Port Orford not that long ago where in the photos you could actually see the kelp in the water off the cliff. And it was like, how long ago were those photos taken? Because that's not here anymore. So that was fascinating when Sarah brought that one up.
I can't even go on Zillow without thinking about kelp.
Cool. I also just want to point out, I forgot if I mentioned this before, but we're collecting similar information. So these responses you guys are giving from groups like you guys, as well as from our Science Technical Advisory Committee and policy groups, so that we can incorporate a lot of these anecdotal stories, as well as like what you guys prioritize, what's important to you in our stewardship plan, and making sure that what we're putting forward is really this like well-rounded, well-informed perspective. So this is really important information, and I see multiple responses online, and so I really appreciate you guys taking the time to do that. So does anyone else have any more changes, or I'll move on to the next one?
A few weeks ago, I was diving, a few months ago actually, and I was kind of caught in palm kelp, and I was kind of moving around and stuff, and I headbutted a purple on top of palm kelp.
Head-butted on top.
Yeah, like it was sitting on top of palm kelp, it's like climbing up it, and then I headbutted and had some spines sticking out my forehead.
That's crazy.
So that is pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's different danger to worry about.
Yeah. Even just walking through the intertidal, there's so many everywhere that like you have to watch your footing or you're gonna get spines through your boots or your shoes or whatever. And seeing all the purple urchins in the intertidal who have like little bits of plastic. I found one with like a golf ball that it was holding up, and they're just, yeah, they're everywhere. Yeah, Tom.
Sometimes a while ago, when there's more kelp that you probably don't see from the surface,
Mhm.
a lot of it's
Mhm.
ripped out when it's small. What we call spaghetti kelp, you know, it's like little, long spaghetti strands, and they're literally touching each other. You can't penetrate.
Hmm.
Remember that, Nick? Sometimes.
Just like a thick wall.
They fell the bandage everywhere.
Huh.
Stuff you can't, it's solid.
Huh.
kelp.
Are you talking about juvenile bull?
Yeah. Yeah.
Noodles, spaghetti.
Yeah, super, super thick.
When was the last time that you'd seen that?
The last time I saw that was in Gold Beach, but it's doing okay with kelp, but
Yeah,
I mean, it's been everywhere. I wouldn't say I've seen it anywhere since
yeah.
for the last, you know, years. Depot Bay last year was pretty big. Depot Bay was pretty thick.
Mhm.
Not many years. No.
Not many urchins.
There wasn't a lot of.
Reds or purples or both?
There's some purple, yeah, not many reds.
Not many
There
reds,
wasn't a lot.
not many purples.
I wonder whether
Yeah,
they were even looking money out there.
interesting.
It was like full blown. You know,
Wow.
kelp was thick enough that one of our divers got stuck, bad enough that we almost tipped them off one.
Really wrapped up in it.
Yeah, he was stuck.
Or I suppose that, so that you had to unplug this one over it and
Go back down.
not briefly. What
Yeah.
are the regulations on, going spring here when full kelp starts popping up? You're gonna see 6-inch, 7-inch plants
Mm-hmm.
floating as the urchins are nipping them off.
Right.
Can we collect those and grow them? Is that legal? Yeah.
I think
That's-
you
that's
can.
floating on the surface.
I think you can collect, I don't wanna say definitively, I think it's kind of a gray area, but you can collect up to like something 1,000 pounds recreationally
For some use.
for
Yeah.
personal use.
So
Or just,
scientific
yeah,
experiment,
scientific
put them in
experiment.
tanks,
Right.
bubble culture them, it's a 2-year animal.
It's
at
a great
that point.
question.
You can grow sorai that well, the supply.
Yeah,
It's a good question, we should talk about it.
yeah,
Because it drives me nuts when you drive up to the kelp and seeing all
Right.
the babies.
and you know they're not
They're
growing,
not gonna make
right,
it because they lost their hold.
right.
There's definitely there's a policy question there. Yeah, somewhere, yeah. We should talk about it. I'd sure like to be able to. But there's a bunch of kelp tanks in and they want me to grow dulse, but I'd like to start growing there.
Yeah,
They do a lot of kelp farming in the southeast.
Yeah, huge, it's growing really big, yeah. Janet, Grove is doing it. He's got expanded for oyster. Oh, yeah. Selling,
it's great to know you're interested in that, because it's definitely something that like moving forward, we need to be growing.
Follow the salt years. There's kelp forests everywhere.
Yeah, and everyone here makes more money, so, like getting their urchins, so, yeah. Part of what we're working on, Brad, too, is policy, and so we're hoping moving forward to provide a couple recommendations and point to where that policy is in Oregon law, that we can actually say, hey, let's point to that and say, let's uplift what we're doing and whether or not it allows for us to do that kind of work.
Right, yeah, one of the policies I'd like to see changed is the undersize of the purples. I can't take them under 2 inches. Really slow.
Yeah,
What if we
we'll chat.
grow too much kelp and then the purple sea urchins eat it and then grow their donuts and have a giant mega spawn and really wipe it out?
It's a great question. It's a great question. Well, I thought that too, though, Tom. That's a great question. Cause it's like, it's kind of that feedback of like, okay, they're all starving, you give them this big meal, and now they have gonads they can reproduce, and so
We did our little test down here at the dock with the purples. One thing I noticed, as soon as you put them in that confined space, one of their first instincts is to spawn the hell out.
they're stressed.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, and it's a question of one of the things is we need to actually be clearing these areas out before we put that kelp back to minimize things like that happening. I mean, if we get commercial urchin divers in there to clear an area and then we outplant kelp, then we don't have to worry as much about a recruitment event immediately after. So, I mean, it's a great question. Cool. Any other changes that people have seen or stories, or move on to the next one?
I would say I've seen
More bottom growth?
more maybe it's getting down there, but. But they had, I don't know what species, but there's a lot of different off of that. You know, short growth.
Short growth.
Did you ever see people that come out red lettuce kelp over there? That's what I know, it's like round up kelp, there's just a lot of red lettuce shit that they want to.
And you didn't used to see that as much?
Works with the purples on the rock,
Mhm.
and then the barnacles had kelp growing on them,
The barnacles had kelp growing on them.
and so there was a lot more growth in general. But
Interesting.
and the big urchins were completely empty.
Yeah.
But the small urchins were eating some of that feed, I think. And so
Are you seeing a difference in the size of reds that are viable for you guys? Yeah? What,
Those type of areas,
Yeah.
that just grows the big game.
they're smaller mostly?
Yeah, the big smaller ones, the ones that are more recovery, for sure.
right on the edge of being legal,
Yeah.
just above 3.5 inches are usually some of our best quality.
The best quality ones, okay.
Anything that gets past 4.5 inches, and it seems to drop off pretty rapidly. Anything we consider a bomber, which would be probably an urchin shell about that big, just crack its head open and grow back in. It's not gonna be worth
They're
it.
not worth it.
Yeah.
And it didn't used to be like that.
Question for you guys, would you have any objections to putting on an upper size limit? I'd really like to see those big bombers stay around for, they really aren't worth selling.
No, they're not worth picking.
Now,
Well, we actually kind of go by, just don't pick the bombers.
yeah, absolutely. Well, in Washington, we could never get that place for a long time, and we took all the bombers. Then we finally got the law on there because the buyers kept saying, I don't want the big ones, we don't want the big ones. And we need those big old animals, 20, 30 years, and they're not sensitive, they will spawn. But, you know, they're all mottled, cracked spots, they don't have.
I thought Washington, I wouldn't want an upper size limit.
No,
No,
this whole area don't take them.
or take them or whatever. I think there's not enough pressure in the state.
Yeah, but you gotta swing there.
That's how the state's managed. It's open for the fishermen that are fishing, and it's sustainable because of the
We don't
price
pressure.
participation. Well, it's like here in Oregon, there's only 12 urchin permits, I believe, currently. And most of the active ones are sitting in the room. Like that one. Another thing with Washington was that I saw that Tim mentioned also was once the big ones move into an area of feed or of what would be a productive area,
You're feeding the big ones, not the babies. Problem in Washington, there's no more babies because it's way overfished. And the tribes keep upping the quota, it's just hammered.
see, in Washington, they used to just be state managed. But then, different tribal, there's a lot of Native American tribes up there, said, well, we used to get that. And now we can't, because we're locked out by the state. And then, so they split the quotas, I guess.
And they went from a 3-year rotation because of the UNA for the tribe, they keep moving to the other tribes area, the quota. Now on each area.
They gave half. They split it between the tribes and the non-tribal, the state managed, and then they gave basically they took half the state managed quota and gave it to the tribes. Then they're in charge of managing it themselves. But it seems like they don't stick to the numbers because it's crashing fisheries and they don't have permit restrictions. Anyone in that try to get a permit, so they explode, everybody fishes till they don't get enough anymore
Mhm.
and move on to something else. And we don't have that here. There's a little guy swimming around in the ocean. Shark bait.
I just wanted to address, I think it was Lee online had asked a question about what the funding status was for hiring commercial divers to do an initial thorough culling of a permitted reef. Then it's more feasible for volunteer divers to maintain it. Sarah said we should be getting some more funds. Optimistic that that'll go through. We have, yeah, and she put another, it's a long response. But yeah, it's basically one of the approaches will be to clear an area with commercial urchin divers, because you guys can be really efficient with that work and clear out a large swath at once. And then have our volunteer divers go in and really do more of that maintenance upkeep work longer term. It's a lot more feasible for you guys to really get a lot of those urchins really quickly and efficiently. And then obviously, if you have that area cleared, we want to make sure that those urchins aren't coming back before we're able to establish a reef. And that's where using these different approaches kind of together works really well. So having our volunteer divers go do culling events in those areas that have been cleared out, and then also using trapping to kind of get those sort of areas that are harder to reach from some of our from a boat or from scuba.
What about possible intertidal?
That's a great question. So right now we're not allowed to. We're not permitted to go below, I think it's like the 10-foot line basically for our scientific take, which is I think the same for you guys.
Yeah, we can't even jump.
Yeah, we're not allowed to go shallower than that. It's one of those areas where it's definitely a really big question mark. It's something where we need more data on the intertidal, but clearly through observational, we've seen upticks in the purple urchins that are there. So hopefully in the future, yes, but right now we're not allowed to do intertidal.
Or even stuff that down 10 feet, which is a big problem. 'Cause
Yeah.
8 feet
Right.
is the problem.
Right, and you see like tons and tons and high densities in those areas, but we can't touch them. And they, I mean, they're not staying in that spot. They can move back and forth. So you clear the subtidal, intertidal is gonna push out there, so.
Well, there's a couple small tide pools just on the backside of the dock that, purpled out completely.
Mhm,
And when I first moved here, there was all sorts of little, growth in there,
mhm.
hermit crab, all sorts of stuff crawling around.
Yeah.
And now it's just a pool of purples.
Yeah, and so I think that, I mean, that's really important. I think one of the things we need to work with is getting some of our divers and some of our, the groups we work with to be able to start doing surveys of that. So we have the data to go to ODF&W and ask for permits to be able to do that work. But right now, there isn't a pathway for that. But clearly it's an issue, so, yeah. What was you had a question?
Yeah, what would the divers that are culling, what would they do with the reds that move into the area?
For volunteers or for volunteers, we're not allowed to touch reds. So reds are off limits for our volunteer culling right now. Yeah,
They would just move into the kelp forest that you guys are trying to.
restore. Yeah, is that an okay response? Is that what you're hoping for?
I was thinking like pet food or something, I don't know.
No, we don't touch them. Our scientific take permit and what we're permitted to do is purple sea urchins only for now. So and we can take survey data on them, but we're not actively doing culling work on any reds. Tom, yeah.
Yeah, we just do like poisonous pellets.
I mean, they do stuff like that in Australia for crown of thorns, but something like that is introducing chemicals to the environment and then you're gonna impact your reds and you don't really want to do that. But yeah, bait them with like a little poison bomb. Yeah, no, there's interesting new things as well with like different robotics and like vacuum cleaners and other methods that are kind of in development and are really interesting innovative ways to address these problems. So if you've heard of even like a long shot idea.
DuPont lures.
What?
DuPont lure. Dynamite.
So what is that? Dynamite, yeah.
So,
Well.
So one thing just for everyone in the room and online, vis-a-vis some of the discussion that we've just been having about what's happening currently, what's happening in the future, the current status of regulations and permits, just so people know that everything Elise just said is true about what is currently feasible or permitted or possible. But we are working on almost all of the things you guys just asked about, sizes, different species.
Mhm.
Those are conversations that are ongoing right now. So we're working with the agencies to address some of the limitations that we currently are experiencing with the current permit regimes.
Yeah.
So just know that that's, everything you just said is correct right now, but there's a plan to address all of those things.
Yeah, so working within those limitations while we have to, and then also putting in recommendations and talking with the groups so that we can move forward and actually address what we want to and need to make progress on this.
And I'm just gonna say, thanks everyone for bringing those issues up.
Yeah.
Here, because this is really helpful when it's time to sit down and have those conversations with the permitting agencies. So that they know that it's not just crazy Tom who's got this crazy idea. But
Yeah.
no, it's a bunch of
But
crazy.
isn't that what you hope me to say?
No, I think I'm speaking to the value that I see in people actually making time to show up and have these conversations. So I really appreciate it. It's really helpful and useful, and I'm taking a lot of notes.
I guess just to keep us moving and then maybe get everyone out of here a little bit early, because I know 2 hours can be a lot of time, especially if you're on the water all day. So moving on to how would a restored kelp forest benefit you or your community? I think that's a very obvious question for some people, but are there ways beyond just that you guys really see this kelp forest, restored kelp forest benefiting you, your livelihood, the live fish guys, fisheries? Yeah, absolutely.
Bikini fishery is gonna be a benefit.
Right.
Just for sheer habitat, hiding places. The list is just too expensive to actually just rattle off, you know.
Go for it if you want to do some of them.
It's been a long day.
Yeah, but yeah, I think that's really important. Fisheries value, economic value, all of that, understanding that it's really important juvenile habitat. I think that's a big one, protective habitat, and just, I mean, we had someone on Monday who said, oh, I haven't seen as many whales because they have nowhere to forage now. So yeah, it impacts a lot of species.
The turtle drift of the kelp up onto the sandy beaches, all the birds.
Right.
I mean, it's the whole ecosystem that suffers.
Yeah.
When there's no kelp.
Yeah.
So all, tourism will come back, the jobs of cleaning fish, selling fish, eating fish, it's just benefits everybody.
Yeah.
And one of the things about kelp that doesn't have anything to do with monetary values or fisheries is just the environment in the forest while you're diving in clear water is really cool.
Mhm.
And, some pretty good experience with so many years.
Yeah.
That was all.
I mean, just, yeah, like intrinsic value of being able to do that and see it. Yeah.
It's one of the main primary production of plants to feed all that stuff in there. It just builds upon itself like crazy.
Mhm. Yeah.
Biodiversity comes back to the ecosystem. That lowers the pH or raises.
Mhm. I think a point that you brought up, Brad, that I just want to acknowledge that I hadn't thought of as much is the bird. So the washed up kelp and who that's feeding and where that goes. I mean, that's a whole other aspect. Yeah.
Sterile sand beaches.
Right. That's a great line.
That's what I thought. That's kind of what was crossing my mind with, to go and take all the kelp off the beach.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of like something made, it was part of something going on. I
Right.
was surprised that they would let you take a bunch of kelp.
Depends how much is out there too. It's like if you have, I mean, Tom was saying the racks that were the same height as him that used to be there just on the beaches right here, and then now we don't have that.
All the sand fleas or whatever hopping around on.
Oh, my favorite.
Swarming. Not to mention, you got a
Smells
lot of,
delicious.
just wait till they smell whale, I'm sure you smelled whale breath. That's even worse.
Yeah.
They got the worst halitosis on the planet. But, yeah, it's just, the beaches aren't anywhere like they were when I first moved here. I've only been here about 13 years, so I'm technically a transplant. But, when I first moved here, it's all I did was walk the beaches. I didn't have a job, broke as hell, bummed. Not much has changed, so.
The reason I brought that up is I just read a study down in California that followed the pulses of the shorebirds and the kelp, and how they're all in sync. And you'll see the kelp come up the next year, there's all kinds more birds, everything's just connected.
Yeah,
And urchins are a part of it too, because
Right.
most of the animals can't eat kelp like that. But when the urchins eat it, they're 40% of their food is wasted in these little chips that are partially digested, which is perfect feed for the barnacles and the sponges.
See a lot of small fish going after
And
it.
absolutely, and you can see those pseudo-feces piles around the cracks of the rocks. The cucumbers are coming up to feed through it. I mean, you can't just get rid of the urchins.
Right.
The urchins are a vital part of the kelp.
absolutely.
But it's just way out of whack.
Yeah.
Well, from what we've been noticing on the boat is, the purples are a much more aggressive species on the kelp beds. Like, or they're just not the smartest urchin on the planet, because they'll just nod off at the bottom and just let it drift away. And a lot of your reds just feed on drift.
Yeah. I mean, also, like, we've talked about this before, and I'm sure you guys know this better than I do, but that, like, before this whole system crashed, the purples would mostly feed on the drift. They're not as active, and now they're more active because they're seeking out food, because it's less common to have that drift kelp coming to them. And so, I mean, when I talk about this as well in the narrative of talking about how purple sea urchins are an integral part of this ecosystem, they're not invasive, they are native. And when we have a healthy ecosystem, they are a part of that, and they're needed for the same reasons that we have, like the opposite reasons of why we have problems right now. And so it's a really important part of the story.
Yeah, and to the feeding behavior stuff,
Yeah.
they did a study with purples, put them into a tank, they're running all over the tank. You put kelp water in there that flavors the water, so they sense that there's kelp around.
Yeah.
They all stop
Yeah,
and wait for the drift.
it's fascinating.
A lot of good work being done these days.
Yeah,
When we had the tanks
Here
down,
especially.
when we had those couple urchin tanks down on the dock, we put the feed in the middle. They come down off the side, eat the pile, and go right back to the sides.
Yeah, they like the top of the tank.
just to acknowledge what someone said online as well is, I believe it's Helen said that a restored kelp forest would also help likely to drive the narrative when marketing local groundfish in metro areas. And so, yeah, I mean, even just being able to point to like where this stuff comes from and being able to show that. Kellen, if you wanted to chat on that one too. Yeah, I see you.
Yeah, sure. I'm a Portland resident. So it's just, we spend a lot of time at seafood restaurants, but there's a lot of, narrative that can be said. And, we've talked about the kelp forest being a groundfish nursery. But there's all these efforts to try and market that, as a kind of a cool alternative to some of the imported seafood that we're buying. So if it sounds like a good investment kind of in kelp forest health for people, it's kind of one of those things that builds on itself. The more people buy, the more they're inspired to purchase it. Maybe that money can end up going to restorative efforts later, but just kind of, keeping it, making it like a local economic driver while also, being scientifically correctly sustainable too.
Yeah, I see that with a lot of purple urchin marketing as well, is if we want people to actually be eating them, we need to do a lot more of that like on the ground effort to really encourage people that, hey, this is something that you can have as a food source and it's delicious. So there's a lot of work going into that, but a lot more work still needs to be done. Cool. Any other comments on restored kelp forest, or we'll get to I think it was the last and final question before I let you guys go. Okay, cool. So this is our last question that I'm going to ask you guys for today. And this one is really important to a lot of the work we're doing, and specifically this stewardship plan. So this one is really important to gather feedback and really hear your perspective. Like I said, this is a similar question to what we're asking policymakers, what we're asking state agencies, conservation groups, our science and technical advisory committee, to really understand how these priorities differ from group to group to group, and find that overlap on where we should be targeting resources. And so with a lot of this work, we all know that resources and funding can be limited. And it is limited. And so we have to prioritize where we can do that work. We're not across the board able to attack the whole coast at once. We really are a small team with a lot of great partners and great people we work with, but we do have to target where we can do that work. And so figuring out how we can have the most impactful and best outcomes when we're doing this, we have to prioritize. And so the question is, what considerations do you think are most important when deciding where to prioritize active kelp protection and restoration work? And I'm happy to talk about the differences between protection and restoration, but I just kind of want to hear what you guys have to say. Some examples just to really get this conversation started as well. It can be things like historic kelp cover, current urchin density, recreational value, fisheries value, coastal protection, any number of things. But I do really want to hear what's most important to you. And you can agree with all of those, but what are the top ones? And so if anyone wants to start us off or talk about what you submitted, yeah, go for it. Yeah.
It's the purple urchins are the word, right? So we seems like authentically, but it becomes a problem. Yeah. Like our problem, our species, so I feel like that's.
We talked about making sure that the harvesters are involved. That we can,
Yeah, like people that are involved are like vocal to what's going on.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Like,
Absolutely.
Just whatever.
Yeah.
With
Keep it
that,
local.
that's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Area,
Area.
are you guys concerned about macrocystis at all?
Not particularly, just because it's not as like big of a species here in Oregon as Nurio, but I mean, I'd love to hear.
Because
Yeah, we can be.
I've only seen macrocystis, and I haven't been everywhere, just in Cape Bay.
There's that one reef there.
Yeah, it's not just Simpson Reef, because you can only focus on small areas. It's Middle Cove south of the big, sea lion rock in the middle. Just south of that, there's a big shelf. And it was super thick macrocystis.
You got that in the state.
Yeah. No, I didn't even see anything. You see anything?
No, just I saw some integral of macros.
Yeah. I did not see any, and I was like, whoa. And I drove all around in there.
I was hoping to find some.
Do you think it might be gone from there for now at least?
I can't really tell if kelp's gone because of urchins or if it's gone just because it's gone.
Yeah. Okay.
Because there's lots of areas that should have kelp that are not overloaded with sea urchins. It's not there. That could be because maybe on the big picture, there's not enough seeding happening to seed it. But I find it strange to see some places. So
Yeah, and that macros should survive for 3 years.
Interesting.
Seeing old plants or.
So I don't know if it's macrocystis not growing, just it's not growing. I don't know what's happening. Have you swam there? Middle Cove, that shit flat area out there.
Just stuff with purples.
It's got a lot of purple on it, and it's a complete barren. And that's a kind of area that you can make. Because if you go just south of that, it drops down into kind of like a no urchin land.
Yeah.
Out in the middle, where it's deeper, freaking swam everywhere out there.
So talking about kind of targeting that that really niche area that is kind of blocked off.
Blocked by a rock, so you're
Yeah.
getting it crawl coming in there.
Right.
And it's not a purple zone, it's a little bit too deep for them coming up onto it.
Yeah.
And then it's got the beach on this side, and then you'll just have purples wrapping around. There's a channel that you would hold them off on, so it's kind of like a strategic. And it's a super heavy bulk kelp normally, and a lot of macrocystis. double down.
I was gonna say that's, I mean, it's important too, as like, that could be an area to target because it has that uniqueness, the macro vistas there as well,
Defendable.
and you can defend it, yeah.
It's got beach and sort of
That's a great
shallow, even if you have bad, light
Mm-hmm,
years or whatever, it's shallow to the bottom,
mm-hmm.
so it gives everything a chance.
How hard is it to access there?
I would say hard,
Yeah,
but I don't think you really do it using the charts a whole
Yeah.
lot. You can,
I love the last of the
It's so
response to that.
I mean, you can kind of line up on some stuff, and go in, but you wouldn't really know that you could or that you couldn't. If you go off to the side, you might get something. Have you ever been there?
Yeah.
And I couldn't find that spot last time I went there. And so I took another more southerly route to the system.
But one of the things that I appreciate that what you just said, this idea of a defensible space. Because obviously, as Lisa said, you gotta prioritize, right? So where do you target your effort? Both in terms of protecting the place we don't have, still have help, or trying to restore a place. But ultimately, a place that is defensible for various reasons, for structural reasons, because it's sort of a fat tree, maybe it's surrounded by sand. I'm thinking a lot about that, and I think that you guys could be a real resource around having conversations like this down the road, where we could sit down and actually look at the imagery map and have you walk us through, hey, I built this area and I know what the characteristics of this particular location are. And that could really help us in terms of like prioritizing, targeting certain sites for those kind of.
Yeah.
That would be really interesting.
Yeah.
I'd really like to see more of the research of the surveys you guys have been doing for Bandon and all those areas that used to have nice kelp. How's that kelp?
What does it look like?
What's the urchins doing there?
Right. Yeah, so Sarah and the status report, that'll be coming out in June 2024, so this year, and that has a lot of the data from the SCUBA surveys, aerial data, all of that wrapped in. There's gonna be a long appendix that highlights a lot of that data more in depth, but also we can connect you and Sarah again to chat about that if you have specific questions. But it's, I mean, it's fast.
Making my plans going forward.
Yeah.
I would like to.
Right.
I mean, I'm looking for you guys to the answers more than me to say where
Right.
to go. Because you're doing the research.
Right.
It's better, you got it documented. To do this right, we've all got it done.
Right.
Exactly.
Maybe talk ODFW and putting out more urchin surveys.
Their cameras.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? These guys are their cameras.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, the eyes on the ground, I think, like you said, Tom, like to be able to see those areas and you guys know what they used to look like, what they look like now, the areas we can actually defend, where there are like sandy spots that keep the urchins from kind of attacking certain areas. I mean, that's all really important. So as we move forward, having those conversations and helping pick out where we want to target, I think that's great.
Another feature of that particular patch is that you can defend the beaches, right? You like to know like the sand and the rocks.
Yeah.
Right? But a lot of visitors are exposed to weather. You could lose the kelp because of the weather. But in Simpson Reef in that little area that I'm talking about, it's walked. It's like an open ocean area, but it's protected. It's a really good spot.
Yeah.
It is, yeah, great spot.
Noted. Okay, cool.
Are there other spots, any of you guys, that you think, because I'm thinking a lot about the restoration versus protection concept. Like, yeah, some effort is going to go into trying to restore something that's been lost. But I see a lot of value in putting some of our effort into retention and keeping some of the stuff that we have. So I'm curious if are there spots that you know of that you're like, it would be great to hang on to this spot.
All of them?
Sure.
I'm thinking, it's a reserve, right? So I can't really get in there.
Yeah.
surrounded by sand, but still there's urchins in there, and I'm hearing that the purples are getting in there pretty darn thick. Marine reserves are a great idea. We have to have them. I think we're moving past the point where just keeping your hands off of it
You need it
is what
intervened.
needs to
Yeah.
happen. It needs to be husband, or it's gonna turn into an urchin bear.
Yeah.
I think the last time we did a survey in Redfish Rocks, it was just everything mowed down through there.
Yeah.
We were doing work on stage.
So, yeah, I mean, but I would really like to see some
Lot of
work done in the reserves.
Yeah.
And at the moment, that's policy as well, problems. And that now, you know, everybody wants to have more 30 for 30, we're gonna put more
Right.
reserves in. It's not really solving the problem. There's been a bunch of studies coming out down from San Nicolas,
Mhm.
that over the years, kelp came back, the urchins should be all gone, and that's not the case.
Right.
And the predators aren't doing what they thought they were gonna do. It's just a whole lot of things are changing from where just no fishing is the solution.
Right. And fishing wasn't the thing that caused
It
this
was
problem.
Yeah, the problem now is we're polluting the damn water, that's a
Right.
problem.
And we have these ecological factors that if we don't do anything, they're still gonna exist. And so how can we sort of use what we have to make sure that we don't lose those last remaining resources? And also, I think it's important, especially with those kind of like refuges where there's still kelp, that increases our ability to then like seed other places like you were talking about. It's this whole idea of connectivity. We need to at least maintain these bubbles along the coast where we have kelp to be able to then continue that natural recovery. So
Do you have any reason as why there would be kelp in the beach year after year and not elsewhere, or that Depot Bay had a scenario, a bottom scenario, and then a kelp scenario, and the bottom scenario didn't change, but the kelp did? Is that just a seeding thing? I'm looking to draw on the seeding.
yeah, I think so. I'll give you a quick answer and then I also might turn to Sarah online to help with that question. We have some of that, sorry, go ahead. Yeah, like we have survey data from Rogue from this year, and while it seems good, some of that survey data is also suggesting that it's really not as healthy as it looks. And so, but there are conditions that make it different, and
It's probably 30%.
yeah, but there is help. So it's still better than some other areas. And I think there are a couple of hypotheses on why it may be, but there are a lot of ecological factors that we don't have data on that might be contributing there. And so Sarah's definitely looking at it for the status report. I don't know, Sarah, if you want to speak on if we know why Rogue might be looking a little bit better and gets kelp year after year, if there's any, if you have any understanding of why that is. And then you also said Depot Bay with understory kelp.
Yeah, just, you have, it seems like the urchins are eating all the kelp, and then the urchins are still there in their spots.
Right. Sarah, do you want to speak on that?
Yeah, I'll speak to Rogue Reef first, which is that, that we just have such little data on Rogue Reef. We have a little bit of data from like urchin surveys back in the 90s, and then this year's stuff, and everything else is anecdotal from urchin divers, or it's from satellite data, which does an okay job, but not a great job. So I would say, yeah, Rogue is not one that I feel like I understand very well. I would be interested, I know the urchin divers have been fishing out of there more recently. So there's ever interest in like putting temperature sensors down or like doing some video transects or something like that. Yeah, I don't feel like I have a lot of clues to try to understand how Rogue is working, but there is a little bit of like a pet hypothesis right now that in Northern California and Southern Oregon, after the 2014 through 16 collapses in kelp, some folks have noticed that some of the refugia, some of the areas where kelp is still all right, tend to be near the mouths of large rivers, like the Rogue River. And so there's kind of a hypothesis going around that like freshwater pulses are really hard on urchins. And so maybe that helps keep the urchins at bay or something like that. So yeah, being at the mouth of the Rogue makes Rogue Reef unique, kind of different. And then Depot Bay, I was really surprised at how well it did in 2023. It's one of the best years in the last like 30 years of satellite data that we have. So it was really a historic year. And yeah, again, I don't, we have right now we're kind of at a phase where we have data to describe some patterns, but we don't have a lot of data to like look into mechanisms and really understand what's driving those patterns. So when you get a surprise like Depot Bay blowing up last year in such a wonderful way, it's kind of hard when you don't actually understand the mechanisms that are driving it. It's kind of just like, yeah, that's surprising to me too. So I guess I would just underline that, like, we've made a lot of progress in the last year or so, but there's still so much to learn. And, if there's like a pet reef or a pet area that you're really stoked about, be happy to talk about ways that we could try to like study it a little bit more or try to unearth more clues.
Yeah, I think the theory that Sarah said, that Sarah mentioned about like the freshwater input is really interesting. And I know they've started putting out sensors in the NorCal region. And so like Sarah mentioned, if you guys are interested in putting out some sensors, we can chat about that moving forward to get more of that environmental data. And that, yeah, the urchins just might be a little bit more impacted by that input. And kelp might be a little bit more hardy to it, but it's just a working hypothesis. There's no real solid answers on it just yet. Cool. I'm gonna jump over to Nicholas. I'm sorry for making you wait so long, but please go ahead, Nicholas. If you're still there.
Yeah, still here. I just wanted to mention that I think the access is our biggest strategy, being able to get people into the water easily. And all the dive sites that we've already registered are pretty well easy to get to via boat or walk-in, especially from Brookings to Port Orford. So I just think that having people be able to get to those sites easily is going to be our biggest advantage, and getting more folks to come out and help get data or coal or whatever.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nicholas. I think that's one of the big ones that we've talked about is sort of this like logistical aspect is we have these coastlines that are really difficult to get to and really difficult to really do any, like a lot of beach access in a lot of places. So you really need a port, you need local infrastructure, things like that. So great point. Cool. Does anyone else have any other priorities that we hadn't sort of chatted about yet? Things that are really important for when we're picking where we're working that haven't come up?
Is there a way to integrate like the fisherman fleet with this all like?
It's a great question. Tom, you want to talk about the mariculture project?
Yeah, so we're just starting open ocean kelp, restorative kelp mariculture project right now that is going to engage with local start having. So yeah, short answer. Absolutely. And I think that the thing that I think you said is the end game here is to really develop all of this into a kelp forest stewardship program that is actually located in the community on the coast, where people actually can, do this for work. Because the long game, we got a lot of work to do, and it is work, as you guys know. And so we're really thinking about that going forward and ensure that we're investing those that infrastructure, the training, the access to equipment, boat time, all of that stuff is part of the project. And as we're going forward this year, we're anticipating receiving the next round of funding from NOAA to actually invest in this work. So whether that be working with you guys to do perch removals and or surveys or putting out sensors or other things we might decide to do. And then this other project that's already funded,
the kelp farm work. Yeah. What's that? Would you say that came out?
Mariculture, M-A-R.
So basically, call it, using the term mariculture as opposed to aquaculture, just to describe basically aquaculture in the ocean.
Yeah.
Marine
aquaculture. It's a great question because it's really relevant. And one of the methods that we talked about with kelp enhancement is those seeded lines. So being able to like seed kelp to actual lines and then outplant them and work with fishermen on getting that on moorings and things like that. So yeah, there's a really close connection there.
Yeah, so stay tuned. That project is starting right now.
Yeah, regarding the sites,
Yeah.
just want to reinforce that you folks in Southern Oregon are blessed. You have a lot of kelp sites historically and currently versus North Oregon. In North Oregon, our coast is a lot more exposed, and the very few, big reef sites that we have are pretty devastated. There's really only 2 or 3 in North Oregon versus maybe dozens or hundreds in Southern Oregon. So they're awfully precious and rare up here. So I appreciate some help. The 2 that have been in the site list so far are Pacific City and Cape Lookout. Cape Lookout's had 0 culling attention, and it used to be a huge kelp bed, much larger than Pacific City. And it's an urchin-berrien for the most part. I saw a little bit last summer on a hike, but not much of kelp, that is. So yeah, help North Oregon.
Thanks for drawing attention to that, Lee. I think you make a good point too, is making sure that we have sites on the northern coast as well. I mean, we talked about it on Monday that we really have this sort of inverse in population versus where historical kelp was. So a lot of our population is in northern Oregon, northern coastal Oregon, whereas a lot of our kelp density was mostly southern Oregon. And so there's that inverse of where the people are versus where the kelp is or where the kelp used to be. And so prioritizing like a specific site or 2 as kind of like a key oasis to have as like a community outreach and being able to target where like people really are, I think is important, as well as obviously those reefs themselves are important, just in general. So thank you, Lee. I appreciate that.
Just out of curiosity, Cape Lookout didn't get kelp along with Depot Bay
Sorry, what was the
this
question?
last year.
Sarah, do you have insight on that, Cape Lookout?
Did it get kelp this year?
Did it get kelp this year compared to last
I
year?
would only be able to look from the satellite record, but actually I may be able to do that kind of quickly. Give me 2 or 3 minutes and let me see if I can find.
That's kind of.
Yeah, I did a
That's
hike.
okay.
I did a hike last summer where you could see, a large portion of what used to be historically there, and it was maybe 5%. If I had to just give an unscientific guess of the historic range.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, Cape Lookout's pretty close. I mean, it's in the zone.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. Yeah.
Well, I think it's like you kind of alluded to it, and I think there is something to the idea that if an area has kelp in the previous year and it produced spores, and then you have a good year for kelp, then you expect to see kelp that following year. But if it's an area where there wasn't a lot to produce the spores for the next year's crop, even if it's a good year for condition lines, maybe that's different. I don't know. That's just one of the things I think about a lot.
Yeah, which I think is, to Lee's point, is having these areas scattered along the coast that we prioritize where we can have those kind of like seed banks almost year to year if we need to be able to seed naturally and keep that up in a bad kelp year. So yeah,
Hey,
great
Lee.
question, Sarah. Yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna say, the satellite data, supports what Lee said, agrees with Lee that there wasn't much, canopy cover there last year. I always feel good when the satellite data and anecdotal data overlap. So it doesn't seem like there was, they got the bump last year that Depot Bay did.
Yeah, no, I've dove there, I think there's been one survey there, but I've dove there personally, and it's just a vast field of urchins. It used to be one of the most abundant. When I was diving there like 2012, it was so thick and so, the fish everywhere, and it's just tragic.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing, Lee. I also, to your point, Tom, too, if you have questions about other locations, Sarah's gonna have a lot of that data, pretty much all of that data in that status report. And so breaking down by like where all these scuba transects and where all the aerial data is. And so you'll be able to look at that for the most recent years and also compared to historical years. So yeah, we'll let you know when that comes out. I'm sure we'll send it to you whenever. Yeah, and there'll be, yeah, just so everyone's aware, when these two documents do come out, is they are going to be publicly available. They'll be published. We can, we're going to put them on our website. There'll be information coming out through our listserv. We'll probably host more events similar to like this, where we'll share our findings and like the most significant things. I'm sure Sarah will talk about the status report. And so you'll know when that's out, and we'll make sure we
send out a few sneak peeks.
yeah, yeah. So, yeah, and we'll have printed copies of it as well as it'll be available online.
That would be like a exclusive viewing where like only select divers.
The VIPs. Yeah,
Yeah.
well, pre.
You have to have removed a certain number of urchins to have access.
You have to donate 2 days of urchin removals.
Then you can see where it goes.
Cool. Does anyone have, I guess, yeah, we're getting to 6 o'clock now. I know I said I'd get you guys out of here early, but this has been great discussion. I do want to say before I lose people online as well, if you haven't, please take the time today, tomorrow to submit that survey. That information is really, really important. We hopefully will be integrating a lot of this into the stewardship plan, as well as if you include your name or your email, we might follow up with you with further questions on it. If you don't want us to, that's also okay. And so this is all really important. I think we had great discussions today. And if anyone has any last comments, feedback, things we didn't touch on, questions you still have, I'm definitely going to be sticking around. I don't know, Sarah, if she has to jump off, but you can also email her if you have follow-up questions. And Tom will be around too if you guys have any more questions. So thank you guys very much for coming. Thank you to everyone online. I'm happy, yeah, if anyone has other comments right now, we can keep the discussion going, but also if you need to head out, okay, too. Yeah.
Thanks, Elise. Good job. Thanks, everybody, for coming. Bye.